We need backup. Joyce, Ibrahim, Ron. We need the Thursday Murder Club. If any harm comes to my friends, I will personally be laying a dozen blood-red roses on your coffin.
Thursday Murder Club is the first novel of British TV presenter Richard Osman. If you live here in the UK, you will know him from things such as Pointless, which he presented for a good number of years. I think it must have been about 10-15 years that he was on that show. In 2020, he sort of diverted his attention from this industry and he went into novel writing. The Thursday Murder Club, upon its release, was a massive success, and as nepotism goes in the UK, as soon as the book was announced, it was basically announced day and day with that the film rights for the book were being auctioned off, and it was a massive bidding war that ensued. It landed with Netflix. Now, this book, I would say, is fairly similar to pop music in my opinion. It's not necessarily for me, but it's kind of just there to be digestible, quick, and fun. And for that reason, this review is going to be shorter because I don't really feel the need to criticize this film in any deep way. It's not designed for that, and whilst some people might argue that it's not fair to criticize other films to a higher standard and this film to a lesser standard, ultimately, the name on the channel is mine, so if you don't like it, you can kind of go somewhere else. This film was immediately over the last weekend has been a major success, and that is in no small part to its gigantic cast. Leading the cast is Helen Mirren, Pierce Brosnan, Celia Imrie, and Ben Kingsley. Even down to the final credit on IMDb, this is no cheap supporting cast. Alongside them, we have Tom Ellis, Daniel Mays, David Tennant, Jonathan Pryce, Naomi Ackie, Henry Lloyd-Hughes, and Richard E. Grant. Now, for the most part, this cast is sort of great, larger-than-life British acting names who will go down in the history books as some of the best British actors and actresses ever, if not the best. But there is also some younger, such as David Tennant and Naomi Ackie. Obviously, David Tennant is already on that sort of been there, done that sort of side of it, but he's a lot younger than the main cast, let's say. Naomi Ackie is a good up-and-comer that I really enjoyed in Mickey 17. I think she's a good actress, and I'm excited to see more from her. I did think she was quite good in Blink Twice, the Zoe Kravitz directorial debut last year, even though I didn't think the film itself was very great. But more directly onto the film itself, this film is set in an old people's home where this titular Thursday Murder Club exists as essentially an activity for a group of elderly people to do in their spare time, which they have a lot of now. But whilst they are doing this club, an actual murder takes place and they set out to solve it. And just off that premise alone, you can probably tell that this is true crime adjacent. It's not true crime, but it feels pretty much like a true crime film. And that is pretty deliberate, I would say. The true crime genre, particularly on Netflix, is a very, very well-treaded ground sort of genre, and that's why it fits kind of perfectly on Netflix, and it is why it's going to be probably one of their biggest ever hits on the service. However, I do think it's a very solid niche to have it set in an old people's home, and I do think, despite the sort of pop-style writing of the film, I actually think there are some good moments in this film of tender looks at the idea of teamwork and the idea of still being able to do what you can even when you're past your best and when you're at your most vulnerable, let's say when you're very old. Whilst it's very surface level, I did think that some of those lamentations on being old are very worthwhile, and I did enjoy them. I would have liked to see more of it, but again, this is pop style, and I'm not exactly expecting that. I do think that some of the pop style writing leads to quite a lot of cliche dialogue here and there. It's all things we've seen before, and it's things that we've seen before where it's directly eye-rollable. I don't feel as if it ever really pushed to the point where I was like, I can't be bothered with this film, but it did have me literally going like, come on, like, you're not saying that again, are we? But again, pop style, I can't expect much better than this because that is what it's going for. I do think that some of the characters are directly quite annoying, and I think some of the performances coupled with that are quite annoying. I think Ian Ventham, played by David Tennant, and DCI Hudson, played by Daniel Mays, are both pretty annoying. And in the case of Hudson, I actually think Daniel Mays is quite outrightly embarrassing. It's somewhere between being this embarrassing detective who's a loser and a sort of a fat slob who can't stop eating. And then in the second half of the film, he's actually somewhat competent, and that's very confusing to me. But I also just genuinely was looking at him in this performance, and I was going, Daniel Mays is a very respected British actor, and yet he's here embarrassing himself. And I understand that a lot of acting is, of course, embarrassing yourself, but this felt like it was just directly making fun of him, and I didn't understand that, and I wasn't really a fan of it. David Tennant on this performance alone, I could throw in a river and never recover the corpse. I think it's outright a dereliction of the film that several of the subplots that they open are just never resolved, and we're kind of just meant to seemingly believe that they've been resolved, or we're meant to just not care, and I was quite confused by that. So for example, the crime boss that is played by Richard E. Grant, one of the characters being arrested, and essentially that being a betrayal, I would say, and also this idea of the individual over team and which functions best, and what is actually the point of this Thursday Murder Club, and is it a betrayal for one of the members of the team to go out on their own? None of these are ever resolved, and I found that to be quite annoying, I have to say. As much as I say that this is a pop style film, I also can't just say that that's fine that you've done that, because this is still a film and you've opened several plots. Finish them. You can't just open them and then not finish them. That's pretty dumb. I think that the main cast is really, really fun. Those four, again, Mirren, Brosnan, Imrie, and Kingsley, I thought were all great in this film. I will say that I think two of the main cast are kind of underused. Celia, Imrie, and Ben Kingsley, I think should probably be used more in the film. And it was a bit disappointing that they weren't, because I actually think that the standouts here are Imrie and Brosnan. Essentially, across this main cast, you can kind of file them all under being caricatures of what they have done for the majority of their career. Pierce Brosnan is the charming usual guy. Celia Imrie kind of plays this motherly and grandmotherly figure. Helen Mirren plays the go-getter, determined feminist woman. And Ben Kingsley plays the quiet, observant, investigative. But again, across the board, I thought all four of these were very enjoyable. And when the film deviates from this main cast, I enjoyed the film significantly less. When the film is focused on any of these four, I had a significantly better time. And in a sequel that is inevitable, I would say, I would focus so much more on this four and eliminate the rest of your ensemble cast, because I didn't ever think that anyone else in the cast was particularly glamorous. I thought maybe they were fine to average, but it was never anything above that. I will say that I think some of my main criticisms come from the directing style. I think everything that we're actually looking at looks pretty sterile. It looks like stages and sets. It never looks like anything lived in. It looks pristine, which I understand that that's kind of what a care home is meant to look like. Nothing on screen looks like it's existed outside of the last 5 minutes that I'm watching. I think that some of the scenes are very spelled out in a Netflix style. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there? And I hate that kind of stuff, even if it's pop style. I hate it. I also hate how many uses of a phone is in this film. That's one of the things I thought I would be able to escape in this film, and instead it was worse than ever. I don't ever really feel like the film has a focal point, and that's a bit disappointing, but given that this is an ensemble cast, you can kind of escape that criticism. But overall, I had a quite pleasant time with this film. I thought it was fun. I thought there was quite a few fun performances here. The writing, although it's pop style and a bit cliched and at points outright annoying with some of the characters, and some of the acting as well quite annoying with that. By and large, I still thought the writing was pretty fun, and I still thought the acting was pretty fun, and the criticism that I have for it, I would probably apply to most Netflix films and most pop style films in general.